When Narendra Modi and Sundar Pichai exchanged words that no one expected, the hall was silent, yet filled with a strange kind of electricity. The audience had gathered expecting a usual meeting between two great men, but no one could have guessed what was about to unfold. The air was thick with respect and curiosity. Narendra Modi walked in with a calm dignity, his presence commanding attention without a single word. Sundar Pichai, standing not far away, adjusted his glasses and greeted everyone with a gentle smile. The two men faced each other, and in that moment, time itself seemed to pause. From the very beginning, people felt something unusual. Modi looked at Sundar not only as the CEO of a global company, but as a man who had carried his roots from a small town to the world stage. Sundar, in return, looked at Modi not only as the leader of a nation, but as someone who had risen from humble beginnings to a position of great responsibility. It was as if their eyes spoke a language of respect before any words were shared. The audience leaned forward, waiting for the usual greetings and polite exchanges. But instead, Modi spoke slowly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the restless crowd. He said, "You remind me of what is possible when struggle meets determination. I see in you the journey of millions who dream beyond their limits." The words were not political, nor were they expected. They were personal, heartfelt, and deeply human. Sundar was taken aback. He had prepared himself for questions about technology, innovation, and global markets. But these words reached deeper, beyond his role and into his heart. For a moment, he felt like the young boy who had once studied under a dim streetlight, hoping one day to build a future brighter than his present. Sundar responded quietly, "Sir, it is your story that inspires millions like me. I grew up believing that no matter how far we are from opportunity, respect, humility, and resilience can carry us forward. And today, standing before you, I realize that success is not about power or position. It is about remembering where we came from and lifting others along the way." The hall was still. No one expected such an exchange. People came for formality, but what they witnessed was honesty. These were not words rehearsed or planned. They were born from real experiences, from struggles that connected two lives on different paths, yet with the same essence. And then, something more surprising happened. Modi walked a step closer, his eyes softer than anyone had seen before. He said, "Every achievement of yours is not only yours alone. It is a reminder to the children sitting in villages who think dreams belong only to cities. You have shown that even the smallest voices can one day be heard across the world." The audience felt their hearts stir. It was not politics. It was not business. It was human truth, spoken with humility. Sundar lowered his head in respect and replied, "And you have shown us that leadership is not about being above people, but standing with them. This is a lesson I carry every day." There were quiet tears in the eyes of some people in the room. No one had expected these two men, known for their achievements and responsibilities, to speak with such simplicity and kindness. It was a reminder that even the highest positions cannot remove the need for respect, for humility, for kindness. This was only the beginning of their meeting, but already the audience knew they were witnessing something unforgettable. Suspense filled the air because everyone wondered, if the first words were this deep, what would follow next? Would more truths be revealed? Would more personal stories come out, stories that no one outside their close circles had ever heard? The silence returned, not from boredom, but from awe. Every person wanted to hold on to this moment. And so began a story that was not about power, not about fame, not about success, but about humanity itself. The audience could not move their eyes away. The first exchange had already broken every expectation, and people were silently hoping the moment would not end so quickly. There was an unusual stillness in the air, the kind that makes hearts beat louder because they know something important is happening. Sundar stood respectfully, His hands folded slightly, while Modi's expression softened in a way that was rare for such formal gatherings. Then, to everyone's surprise, Modi asked Sundar a question that carried weight far beyond the room. He said, "Tell me, Sundar, when you sit at the top of one of the biggest companies in the world, what do you think about in the silence of night? Do you think of power, or do you think of the faces that guided you when you had nothing?" The hall froze. No one had ever asked Sundar something so personal in such a public space. It was not about strategies or technology. It was about his heart. Sundar took a deep breath, and his voice trembled just enough for people to sense his honesty. "Sir," he began, "in the silence of night I do not see the office towers or the markets. I see my mother cooking in a small kitchen. I see my father working tirelessly so that we could study. I see my teachers who never gave up on me, and I see the streets of Chennai where my journey began. These are the pictures that never leave me. They remind me that no matter how high I rise, my roots hold me steady." His words touched the room like a quiet wave. The people listening were not only hearing about Sundar's journey, they were seeing themselves in it. They remembered their own parents, their own struggles, their own nights of hope. The story was no longer about a leader and a CEO. It became about humanity. Modi nodded slowly, as if each word struck a familiar chord in his own heart. Then he said, "You speak of your parents with respect. I, too, know that feeling. When I look back, I see my mother working long hours just to keep food on the table. She had no great wealth, no comfort, but she gave me strength. She gave me humility. I would not be standing here without her sacrifices." The hall grew heavy with emotion. No one expected the Prime Minister to open his heart so deeply in front of so many. But there he was, sharing a truth that every common man understood. It was a rare sight, two of the most powerful men in their fields speaking like sons remembering their mothers. Sundar's eyes shone with emotion. He said gently, "Sir, the world often believes success is about money or recognition. But listening to you reminds me that success is also about gratitude. Without gratitude, even the biggest position feels empty." There was a long pause after those words. People shifted in their seats, trying to take in what had just been said. It was not easy, because it forced everyone to reflect on their own lives. Had they remembered to thank those who helped them? Had they carried humility in their achievements? Then, a sudden twist came. A young student in the audience, unable to hold back his feelings, stood up and asked, "Sir, if gratitude is so important, then why do so many forget it once they become successful?" The hall gasped. It was bold, maybe even risky, but the boy's voice carried pure innocence. Instead of being upset, Modi turned towards the boy with a kind smile. "You are right to ask this," he said. "Many forget, because success can blind us. But it is also the duty of leaders and role models to remind the world that humility is greater than pride. That is why today I speak openly, so that people like you can carry these lessons forward." Sundar added softly, "And if you carry gratitude with you, then even when others forget, you will never lose your way. This is the greatest strength you can hold in a world full of distractions." The boy sat down slowly, his eyes filled with tears, and the hall broke into gentle applause. It was not the loud applause of entertainment. It was the quiet applause of respect, the kind that comes when hearts are truly moved. What began as a formal meeting had now turned into a conversation about life, about roots, about humility. And the audience could sense that this was only the beginning of something much deeper. After the young student sat down, the atmosphere in the hall became even heavier with emotion. People were no longer thinking about their busy schedules, their phones, or the outside world. Every heart was pulled into the moment. Eyes were fixed on the stage where two men stood, not as symbols of power, but as human beings sharing their truths. Sundar looked across the hall, his eyes scanning the faces in the audience. He could see pride, curiosity, and hope glowing back at him. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Many times I ask myself, what is the true meaning of leadership? Is it to guide a company towards growth? Is it to speak on big stages? Or is it something more? To me, leadership is not about standing above others. It is about walking with them, carrying their struggles with respect, and making sure that in your success, others also find light." The words carried across the room like a soft wind. People nodded, some with tears forming, because they understood what he meant. They had seen leaders who chased power, but few who carried kindness. Modi listened closely. Then he responded, his voice strong yet filled with emotion. "True leadership," he said, "is tested in the darkest moments. When there is no applause, when there is no camera, when there is no reward, that is when you know who you really are. And the truth is, humility is the strongest shield. Without humility, even the tallest mountain of success will crumble." The hall grew silent again, as if those words carved themselves into every heart. Just then, a sudden moment added suspense. The lights flickered for a brief second, almost as if the hall itself reacted to the intensity of the words being spoken. The audience gasped softly, but then laughter broke out as the lights returned. It was as though the universe was reminding everyone that even in small interruptions, humility and calmness were needed. Modi smiled gently at the crowd and said, "See, even the lights are testing us." The audience laughed more, releasing the tension, but the depth of the message remained. Sundar then took a step forward, his expression thoughtful. "Sir," he said, "you spoke about dark moments. I remember one of mine. When I first joined Google, I was just one voice among many. There were times when my ideas were ignored and I questioned myself. But I remembered my father telling me, 'Strength is not in loudness, strength is in patience.' So I stayed patient. And slowly, the same voices that once ignored me began to listen. I learned that resilience is not about fighting loudly. It is about standing firmly without anger." The audience listened in silence, and many felt a mirror reflecting their own lives. Who among them had not been ignored, rejected, or underestimated at least once? Sundar's words reminded them that patience and resilience can change rejection into respect. Modi nodded with approval. "Your father was right," he said. "Resilience is the hidden power of the common man." When I worked selling tea as a child, no one could have imagined where life would take me. Many looked down upon me. Some laughed, some doubted. But I told myself, respect does not come from what you hold in your hand. It comes from how you hold yourself in front of the world. Those words sent a ripple across the hall. People who had faced struggles in their own lives felt as though Modi had spoken directly to them. For a few moments, the gap between the stage and the seats vanished. They were no longer audience and leaders. They were one community bound by stories of struggle and resilience. Then came another unexpected twist. A journalist raised his hand and asked, "Sir, Sundar, both of you faced struggles. But do you believe that struggle is necessary for greatness? Can success come without pain?" The question hung in the air. It was sharp, daring, and real. Sundar answered first. "Struggle is not something we choose," he said softly. "It comes to us whether we want it or not. But the truth is, struggle teaches us what comfort cannot. It shapes humility, it builds respect for others, and it teaches us resilience. Without it, success feels empty." Modi followed, his voice firm. "Pain is not a punishment. Pain is a teacher. Every time life pressed me down, I stood up stronger. Without those struggles, I would not have the strength to serve today. So yes, success without struggle is possible, but it has no soul. The hall erupted into a quiet applause again, filled with respect rather than noise. People felt as though they had been given a gift, truth spoken without filters, without masks. And so the story continued to deepen. The words exchanged were not planned speeches. They were seeds of wisdom planted in every listener's heart, seeds that would grow long after the hall emptied. The weight of the last exchange still hung in the room. People could feel their hearts beating faster because they knew they were not only hearing about leadership and struggle, they were witnessing something that would live in memory forever. Every pause, every word seemed to carve itself into silence. After a long moment, Sundar spoke again, his voice low but clear. Sir, sometimes I wonder what truly matters most in life. It is easy to be lost in work, in numbers, in recognition. But when I think deeply, I realize it is not the achievements that define us. It is the values we carry, the respect we give, the kindness we share. When I return to my hometown and see the same streets where I once walked as a boy, I am reminded that life is not about moving away from our roots, but about carrying them with us, no matter how far we travel. The audience listened as though they were hearing their own stories retold. Many thought of their villages, their childhoods, the faces of people who had shaped them. Sundar's words turned memories into mirrors, showing that greatness was built on small steps that never left the soul. Modi looked at him thoughtfully and replied, You are right. When people forget their roots, they lose their strength. Roots give us humility. Roots remind us that no matter how tall we stand, we were once small. And this truth is what connects leaders to their people. Without this connection, leadership becomes empty. His voice carried authority, but also gentleness, and it moved the hall. One elderly man sitting in the back wiped his tears, whispering to himself, These are the words our children must hear. Then a twist came that no one expected. A woman from the audience stood up. Her hands trembled, but her eyes shone with courage. Sir Sundar, she said, I lost my husband last year, and I work day and night to raise my 2 children. Sometimes I feel hopeless. Listening to you both today gives me strength. But tell me honestly, do you ever feel hopeless too? And if you do, how do you rise again? The hall grew silent. It was a bold and raw question, full of pain. The woman's voice shook, and everyone could feel the heaviness of her truth. All eyes turned to the stage. Sundar stepped forward first. He looked at her with compassion, and his voice softened. Yes, I have felt hopeless, he said. When I was a young student, there were days when I doubted myself. I wondered if I would ever make it. But I told myself that even the smallest step forward is still progress. Sometimes we cannot change everything at once, but we can take one step and then another. Hope is not about seeing the full path. Hope is about believing that the next step will take us closer. His words trembled with honesty, and many in the audience lowered their heads, holding back tears. Modi then added, his voice steady but full of emotion, Sister, life tested me many times. I too felt hopeless when I had nothing but a few coins in my pocket. But I learned one truth. Hopelessness is not the end. It is the beginning of strength. When the world turns its back, you must turn to your own heart and remember that resilience is born from pain. You are already a leader because you are carrying your children forward with courage. Do not underestimate yourself. The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, and the hall broke into gentle applause. It was not applause for power, but for humanity, for kindness, for words that touched the deepest wounds. And in that moment, everyone realized something bigger. This meeting was not only about two men exchanging words. It had become a space where ordinary people found their reflections, where hidden pain was given light, and where every listener carried home a message of resilience. Then Modi looked at the entire audience and said, "Let us remember this. Struggles will come, losses will come, but as long as we carry respect, humility, and kindness, nothing can defeat us. Not truly." The hall was silent once more, but this silence was not heavy. It was filled with strength. People now knew they were part of something historic, something that would stay in their hearts long after they left. The woman's courage had shifted the entire hall. Her voice, filled with pain and hope, lingered long after she sat down. People could feel that this gathering was no longer a formality. It had become a mirror for every struggle, every dream, every hidden wound. Sundar and Modi were not speaking from positions of power anymore. They were speaking as human beings who had walked through storms and carried scars of their own. For a few moments, there was silence again. Then Sundar broke it with words that came straight from his heart. "When I look at this hall," he said, "I do not only see faces. I see thousands of stories. I see sacrifices that will never be written in books. I see mothers who worked without rest, fathers who gave up comforts, children who studied with broken lamps. These are the real foundations of success. I may stand here as a CEO, but I know my story is not only mine. It belongs to every person who believed that struggle could lead to something better." The words reached every corner of the room. Some people quietly nodded. Others wiped their eyes, because Sundar's voice carried the weight of their own journeys. Modi then looked at the audience, his eyes sharp yet full of warmth. "We often believe," he said slowly, "that greatness is about standing above the crowd. But I tell you, greatness is about standing with the crowd, lifting them when they fall, and walking with them when they are weak. Leaders are not born in palaces. Leaders are born in the dust, in the heat, in the small battles of daily life. I was not born into power. I was born into struggle. And that is why I say to every person here, you already carry greatness inside you." His words created a ripple of energy. People felt stronger just listening to him, as if invisible walls of doubt were breaking apart. Then, an unexpected twist came. A young man in the crowd stood up and said in a trembling voice, "Sir, Sundar, I have studied hard. I have tried to rise. But every time I try, I face rejection. Doors keep closing, and I feel as though I am not good enough. How do I continue when the world tells me I am not worthy?" The hall fell silent again, holding its breath. Sundar looked directly at the young man. His voice was calm but full of fire. "I know that feeling," he said. "When I applied to universities, I faced rejection too. Even after joining Google, many times my ideas were not accepted. Rejection does not mean you are not worthy. Rejection means you are being tested. If one door closes, you must knock on another. And if every door stays shut, then build your own door. The world respects those who refuse to give up." Modi added with a firm tone, "I too was rejected many times in life. People doubted me, they laughed at me, they tried to keep me small. But remember this, no one can measure your worth except you. The world may say you are not ready, but if you carry resilience, if you carry humility, then your time will come. Rejection is not the end. It is a step towards the beginning." The young man's eyes filled with tears, but his face lit up with new determination. The audience applauded, not loudly, but with deep respect, because they too had known rejection, and they too needed to hear these words. At that moment, something rare happened. Sundar turned towards Modi and asked him directly, "Sir, What kept you going when everything seemed against you? The hall leaned forward, waiting for his reply. Modi paused, his eyes distant as if he was looking back into his own past. Then he said quietly, "What kept me going was faith. Not faith in power, not faith in destiny, but faith in the strength of people. When I sold tea as a boy, I believed that no hardship could erase my dignity. When I faced obstacles in politics, I believed that humility would protect me. Faith carried me when nothing else did, and that faith never left me." His voice trembled slightly, and for the first time people saw a glimpse of the weight he carried inside. It was a moment of raw truth, and it settled into every heart. Sundar listened with deep respect and replied, "Your journey shows us all that resilience is not about never falling. It is about never refusing to rise again. I will carry this lesson with me always." The hall was filled with silence again, but this silence was powerful. It was the kind of silence that made people sit straighter, breathe deeper, and believe stronger. The atmosphere in the hall had shifted completely. No one was thinking about politics. No one was thinking about business. They were thinking about life itself. Every word spoken between Modi and Sundar carried weight, as if the room had become a place where truth could finally breathe. Sundar stood quietly for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice softer than before. "Sir," he said, "there is something I have often asked myself. When people look at me, they see the title, they see the success. But inside, I sometimes wonder if I have done enough for others. Because what use is my journey if it does not help someone else take their first step?" The audience leaned closer. His honesty touched them, because deep down, they too carried the same doubt, whether their efforts truly mattered. Modi listened carefully and then responded with words that echoed through the hall. "Sundar, what you have shared is a question every leader must ask. But let me tell you this. When even one life is changed by your work, then your success has meaning. You may not see it immediately, but every act of kindness, every step of humility creates ripples that reach farther than you imagine. Never doubt the silent impact of your journey." The hall filled with quiet nods. People began to realize that greatness was not measured by the crowd's applause, but by the unseen lives touched along the way. Suddenly, another voice rose from the crowd. It was an older man with a weathered face. He said with a trembling tone, "Sir, I spent my whole life working in small jobs. I never became rich. I never became known. Listening to you both, I feel small. Does my life hold any value at all?" The hall went still again. All eyes turned to the stage. Sundar's expression softened as he replied, "Sir, your life holds more value than you realize. Success is not about fame. It is not about wealth. It is about the love you gave your family, the honesty with which you worked, the respect you carried. If you lived with humility and kindness, then you are greater than many who hold power but forget their roots." Then Modi spoke firmly, his voice filled with strength. "Brother, never say your life is small. The measure of a life is not in titles. The measure of a life is in dignity. If you raised your children with honesty, if you worked with integrity, then you have already achieved greatness. The world may not write your name in books, but in the hearts of your family and those you touched, you are eternal." The old man's eyes filled with tears, and he sat down slowly, holding his hands to his face. The audience was silent, moved to their core. Many realized in that moment that greatness was not something distant, it was something already within them. Sundar then turned to Modi and asked with respect, "Sir, in your journey, what was the hardest lesson you learned?" Modi closed his eyes for a second as if searching through memories. Then he spoke. "The hardest lesson I learned was that respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. There were times when I wished people would understand me, accept me, but I realized respect comes not from words, not from power, but from consistency, from resilience, from humility. You cannot force respect. It grows like a seed, slowly, silently, until one day it stands tall. The words settled deep into the hearts of the listeners. Many thought of their own lives, of moments when they had tried to be seen, to be respected, and they understood now that true respect was built in silence, not noise. Sundar looked down for a moment, then said softly, "Thank you for sharing this, sir. It reminds me that even when the world does not see us, we must continue walking with humility, because one day the world will recognize what we carried all along." The audience felt as though they had been given a gift, a truth that could guide them long after this day was over. The hall felt heavy with silence, yet it was a silence filled with strength. People had heard stories of pain, resilience, humility, and kindness. They had seen two men strip away titles and speak as sons, as dreamers, as humans. But the audience still sensed that something more was coming, something that would remain in their hearts forever. Sundar looked at Modi with deep respect, then turned back to the crowd. "We have spoken about struggle, about respect, about humility," he said slowly. "But I want to leave you with one thought. Never believe that your dream is too small. When I was a boy, my dream was not to become the CEO of Google. My dream was only to study well and make my parents proud. Small dreams lead to bigger dreams. Every step matters, so do not wait for greatness to come to you. Greatness begins in the smallest acts you do with honesty." His words struck like lightning in the hall. Many people closed their eyes, thinking of their own small dreams, dreams they had once believed were meaningless. Now they saw them as the seeds of greatness. Modi stepped forward after him, his voice carrying a different kind of power, the power of truth. "Sundar is right. The world teaches us to chase what is big, but I tell you, what is big is not always what is great. The greatest man may be the one who teaches a child to read. The greatest woman may be the one who keeps her family strong in times of pain. The greatest youth may be the one who refuses to give up even after failure. Never doubt the strength of small acts, because they build the future." The audience erupted into gentle applause, but there was no cheering, no shouting. It was the kind of applause that came from the soul when hearts recognize a truth they had long forgotten. Then, as if guided by the moment, Sundar turned to Modi and asked the question that no one expected. "Sir, if there is one message you want to leave for every young person listening today, what would it be?" The hall froze again. Everyone held their breath. Modi looked around slowly, his eyes meeting the faces of young and old, rich and poor, hopeful and broken. Then he said quietly, with great weight, "Never let success make you arrogant, and never let failure make you weak. Respect every person, even when they cannot give you anything in return. Carry humility, because humility is greater than pride. Carry kindness, because kindness is stronger than power. And carry resilience, because resilience will carry you when nothing else does." The words fell into the hall like sacred truth. Some people cried openly. Others held their hands together in prayer. It was not just advice, it was a promise, a reminder, a guide for life itself. Sundar placed his hands together in respect and said softly, "Thank you, sir. These words will stay with me, and I will carry them wherever I go." Modi returned the gesture, his eyes warm, and replied, "And I thank you, Sundar, for reminding us all that success with humility can inspire generations." The two men bowed slightly to each other, and the hall rose in silence. There was no noise, no shouting, no celebration. Only the sound of hearts beating together, carrying the truth they had heard. As the crowd began to leave, many walked with lighter steps, their burdens softened, their spirits lifted. They knew they had witnessed something rare, not a meeting of titles, but a meeting of souls. And so, the story ended Not with power, not with pride, but with respect, humility, resilience, and kindness, the values that turn ordinary lives into extraordinary journeys.